some background and context about how you got here today, and some background and intros. And Tiffany, how about we kick it off with you?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and be a part of this conversation. And I have my notebook so I can actively take notes as well. So I'm Tiffany Stevenson. I'm the Chief People Officer at Patreon. For those of you not as familiar with Patreon, we are a business that really is changing the way art's valued. We definitely believe that creators and the work that they do has been grossly undervalued. And so we're really powering an economy where creators can get paid by the fans who love them. And we're so proud that we have over 200,000 creators of all different stripes making incredible work. And so I get to support over 300 Patreonauts, that's what we call ourselves, across 4 countries, and we get to support incredible creators. Some of my favorites right now, Issa Rae, Kev on Stage, Nicole Cardoza. So we're really excited about the diversity and inclusion that we get to support. Previous to that, I was at Box, another incredible company where I got to look after our talent and inclusion and philanthropy work. And then prior to that, 12 amazing years at Sephora, and I'm still a VIB Rouge, very proud of that as well. But just look forward to being a part of today's discussion and talking about growth, development, the important work that women of color are doing to drive all of what we love about tech.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Lilly?
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm sure we have folks from all different time zones here. My name is Lilly Genghis. I'm the Chief Technology Community Officer at the Caper Center, where we're really focused on removing barriers in order to make the tech ecosystem and entrepreneurship more diverse, inclusive, and impactful. And specifically, our work at the Caper Center focuses at the intersection of racial justice and technology. And we are doubling down on our fight for racial justice. And I think this dialogue that we're going to have today, specifically as we double down into the impact that it's had on women of color, I think it's really important to bring up the necessary solutions that we should be advocating for, and then also how we can continue to support each other. And through my work at the foundation, there's specifically 3 focus areas: CS equity, advancing racial equity in tech, strengthening tech ecosystems. I'm particularly focused on the strengthening ecosystem. So this past year and a half, I really have dived into policy and specifically helping develop our racial justice and tech policy, as well as how do we continue to using partnerships, programs, and strategic grants to foster an inclusive tech ecosystem building, as well as supporting the foundational needs of our communities of color as we are coming out of COVID. And so look forward to sharing some of that work. And previous to the Caper Center, I started my career as an engineer. And so for me, it's my lived experience and passion for technology and the power that it can have to close gaps of access. It provided me the opportunity for upward economic mobility that, helped my family as well, especially because my story is a story of an immigrant. And then went into working as a software and hardware engineer at aerospace industry, which is a whole different world. And then eventually making my way towards the private sector, more consulting ranges at Accenture, Booz, and now at the Caper Center. I'm also a lecturer at Mills College, specifically raising awareness on the power that technology has and why it's important for us to continue this work. So excited to be here with you all.
Thank you so much, Lilly. Nina?
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Silicon Valley Forum for the kind invitation to be here today. A little bit of a disclosure, I'm coming in from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. I'm on my family vacation, but I could not deny the opportunity to motivate and inspire women, particularly women of color in tech. So I am here with you today with a grateful heart. I'm here to share and to learn. Lilly and Tiffany, I love your energy, and I am a lifelong learner, so I know I can learn from you as well. Really excited to be here. I am chairman and chief executive officer of a company named Pinnacle Group. We're the largest Latina workforce solutions company in America, and proud to be doing so. I founded the company 25 years ago. Lilly, I too am an immigrant to this country. My mother and father immigrated from Quito, Ecuador, South America. And so I took those entrepreneurial skills and I started a company from my living room floor 25 years ago. Today, Pinnacle serves some of the largest companies in the world. We provide them with IT labor, or we manage companies that provide IT labor. So the technology industry changed my life forever. And my day job is to be a chief executive officer and grow this company. And we have grown it from my living room floor to a global country that has representation in over 10 different countries today. So we serve some of the largest companies in the financial services space, in the tech space, and in different communications and media space. And it has been an incredible journey of 25 years of building this company. And so if anyone can glean from my experiences and share my failures and my failures and my successes, I'm just here to share. So thank you again for the invitation to be here today. I'm looking forward to sharing.
Thank you so much, Nina. And Ina Marie? Marie?
Hello, everyone. I am Ina Marie Johnson. I am the Chief People and Chief Diversity Officer for Zendesk, and we are the champions of customer service, as my background says. And I'm delighted to be here as well. What a just amazing group of women. I, like Nina, am looking forward to the conversation and learning from all of you. Zendesk is a software as a service company, and we are in the tech space. We're based in San Francisco. We have just about 5,000 employees globally. And one of the things that I love about my role is as the Chief People and Chief Diversity Officer, I can make sure that conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion are at the center of all of the people business strategy conversations. I am a direct report to our CEO. And so by bringing that diversity role into the C-suite and what we call E-staff, we have it threaded through our entire company. We never want the diversity work to sit to the side. It is very much a part of how we go to market and how we believe we can be the best company that we can be. We find ourselves creating software that helps others connect with their customers. And so in order to have that happen in the best way, we have to make sure our employees are at the center. And that is obviously all employees, but in particular, we as a software company have been stepping up our work around ensuring that underrepresented talents and voices are supported, are heard, and more importantly, are thriving in our company. So I'll look forward to talking about some of those efforts. As for me, I'm an HR practitioner. I've done this for the last 30 years, and it's always been important to me to see people and to see women of color, to see other underrepresented talents, to let them know, like, I see you, I see what you are contributing, and I want to make sure that you're thriving and that there is a place for your voice. That is what I was taught by my parents very early on, that you belong, you have value, you have a voice. And I've always kept that at the center of my work. So with that, I look forward to this conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ina Marie. Okay, so I have a lovely list of questions, but I also want to let the audience know that we do want to save some time at the end for your questions. So if there's anything you'd like to ask or that comes up during the panel, please feel free to chat your question into the box, and we'll definitely leave some time at the end to make sure that we get to some of those questions as well if we don't get anything that you were hoping to get answered through the chunk I have prepared. So the first question I kind of had and I wanted to present to the panel here is, before the pandemic hit, when we thought we took life as we knew it for granted. So in that pre-pandemic world, what was your number one personal challenge in just managing your work-life balance in the workplace? And how about we go with Lilly? Do you want to start off?
Sure. I think before the pandemic, and I was sharing this earlier, I was always just on the go. And I'm sure everybody here is similar, right? Where like it was always managing all the different projects, multiple projects, and just feeling that you were drinking from a fire hose is normal, right? And I think for me, one of those, I think that the pandemic itself was a good resetting and reprioritizing, rebalancing a lot of the work. But I would say that specifically the number one challenge is that I'm a visions person. I love connecting the dots. I love to think out of the box. I love to create. But one of the challenges is making sure that it's resourced properly. And that means from the teams, the time, the buy-in, the support and whatnot. And I think, for me, before the pandemic, I was like, okay, we're going to do this and just getting all excited, rallying people up, right? And so I would just say that it was some of that excitement to being able to balance it out with like, okay, what is it really going to take for this to be successful, and reprioritizing.
And then actually, I'm going to add on a question for everyone here as well to that question is that, did that actually change during the pandemic? And if so, how?
So I'll answer that second question, half of the question. It definitely did. It actually helped me, like I shared, it helped me like pause, reflect. It helped me rethink my morning routine. And so like right now, actually, I have my little candle, I have my meditation, I have my affirmations that I read every morning. And as we know, we now that we're past some of the hardest points of the pandemic, we know that there's still families that are suffering day in and day out. And so for me, that was my conviction of what I would wake up every morning to make sure that I was acknowledging and honoring my privilege, but then how would I put my privilege that I have to be able to work from home, to be able to pay that forward. And so I would say that it just helped me just really reset, rebalance, have more focus, and continue to do the work with even more dedication.
Amazing. Anyone else like to share?
I'm happy to share. I think as working in tech and a fast growth company pre-pandemic, there's a lot of change and a lot of transformation. And so the skill and practice that I have is around resilience. How can I make sure that I'm taking the time to reflect, to, listen, to pause, to refresh, and to be able to take that next curve or shift and so forth. And obviously the pandemic made that even more of a life skill to be constantly in practice with. I know when things were really in the heart of the pandemic, slowing down and having my yoga practice was really, really important for me. I like to say yoga saved my life, and it's an opportunity to be mindful, to reflect, to quiet all of the noise, because change can be very noisy and there can be a lot of signals coming through. And the last thing I would say, I found myself acknowledging the privilege I have. I have adult children, so watching so many, we have a very younger workforce. The average age is probably under 35-ish. So a lot of our colleagues were dealing with school, and they were dealing with not having private workspace. People were working in a corner. We had one guy working in his, water room, basement. I mean, we just had all kinds of configurations. And so making sure that as a senior leader, I could create space for people to take care of themselves, and to be okay with the camera off, to step away, to be gone in the middle of the day, making lunches and things that were just very much real. So it became less about me, because I had a lot of privilege and I had a lot of, just time where so many of our colleagues did not. So it was about doing and creating space for others as a senior leader to be able to capture that resilience as well. And I think that's going to continue. I think that's going to be even more necessary in the next phase.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on this?
Sure, I'm happy to chime in. Just building on Anne-Marie's comments of challenges. In the last 25 years, if I had to reflect on the biggest challenge I've had, and by the way, it continues to, the last 25 years, the biggest challenge has been reinventing myself for forward-looking. And that is, in the last 25 years, I went from a startup entrepreneur, full entrepreneur. We almost went out of business in 2001 after 9/11. And then immediately, and then this is actually our third pandemic. And then we survived the 2008 the 2008, 2009 financial collapse, and now within COVID. And so when you think about who I was 25 years ago, I was 25 years old. I had just started a company. I was the first to graduate from college in my family. I had so many firsts in my life. And in the last 25 years, I've become a CEO of a global company, a director of a public traded company, a presidential ambassador, a mother, and a triathlete. And so having to reinvent myself in search of the best version of myself was always a big challenge, because it involved self-reflection and it involved a learning mindset and the ability to learn and grow. In fact, I look for that. And so if you ask the question, the pandemic, it has only heightened that same thing. It has only heightened the opportunity to do just that. And so I feel like the pandemic really pushed me to find yet again the next version of myself. Leading a company, a global company, during the pandemic was one of the most challenging things I had ever done in my life, but one of the most rewarding. And so I took the responsibility and the service of servicing the company, getting us through the other side of COVID, and nothing could have been a greater challenge, but a more fulfilling one.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tiffany, any thoughts from you?
Totally. I think I was trying to dial it into one message, and I think the overwhelming feeling that I think I had to sort of start to move through was this idea of vulnerability. I think one of the things that happens in your career is you push through. And I think especially being a woman of color, I grew up with the adage, if you have to work twice as hard to go half as far. And so I think that built a persona of like, you get it done, you make things happen, and no matter what sort of coming your way, you figure it out. And I think I brought a lot of that. Of course, that's definitely, I think, something that has powered, success and accomplishment, but there is definitely a shadow side. And I think it just took the pandemic to really recognize that a lot of people are dealing with a lot of things that are happening. And when I reflect on last year, it wasn't just the pandemic and having to make this shift, working from home and figuring out new problems, as Ina Marie so eloquently captured. It's things were happening in the world that were having horrific. I mean, I wasn't okay, and it was, it started with George Floyd, then Ahmaud Arbery, and then Breonna Taylor. And then, it was the and still feeling like you have to come to work like, okay, let's talk about item 3 that's on our agenda today. And that's not real. And I think being uncomfortable was something that I had to work on, that I'm sure has had an impact in my work-life balance, because I try to make things work, versus kind of recognizing that if I can't be vulnerable with my team, with my colleagues, then how are we creating a culture where we can make that okay for others? And so a lot of work that we got to do last year was thinking about, what does vulnerability mean in the workplace? Because you're not bearing your soul, because that can be wildly uncomfortable, but figuring out what feels right and how do you make space for that? How do I get the executive team to talk about things that maybe make them feel uncomfortable? And how do we create a culture where we can talk about what is it that we need and how can we support those needs? And starting by making it okay that everything isn't awesome and that it's okay to be in that space. And it doesn't have to compromise the work that we're trying to get done together. So I think that was a good lesson that I had to start with myself to kind of think about, how do I reconcile that for me? And then how do you start to codify a culture around that, which then opened up, we saw our usage of some of our mental health and wellness benefits, or some of the community corner events that we were doing, really start to take off, because you could see at all levels in the organization that people were coming very real with very real things that were happening. So it was a good personal lesson for me. And I think that's one that I'm carrying forward in this role as well, of how do you keep it real in the workplace?
Absolutely. And I think and thank you all for sharing those stories, because I think it's an important part of this also for people to share and understand they're not the only ones, right, going through these kind of emotions and thoughts. And I can't echo enough the importance of meditation and mindfulness. And to your point, Tiffany, too, I actually just reread the Brené Brown book, Dare to Lead. And I think it really, if anyone hasn't had a chance to read that, I think a lot of leaders should, in learning how vulnerability and empathy and really having, like you said, these difficult conversations is going to make a huge impact as we move forward. So now kind of moving on from that into what's really happening now. We've all kind of heard this number and what's been going on. But as a reminder, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, Black, Latinx, Asian women have pretty much accounted for all the women's job losses just last December, which I think accounted for over 150,000 Black women dropping out of the labor force entirely. Right. And so I'm curious, do these statistics kind of reflect what you've seen within your organizations? And if so, why do you believe this to be the case? And how about I throw that question to Ina Maria, because you mentioned some things that you guys were doing within your organization, then we can take it from there.
Sure. First of all, those statistics are staggering. I mean, there's no way to read and, as they say, watch that movie and not be moved. And I think one of the things that when I listened to the original stats, I wanted to go learn more. And I think if you unpack it, what you also understand is it's not necessarily that Black and brown women even have the privilege to opt out. It is that many of their jobs were the ones that were cut and were taken away. And so therefore, of course, it looks like they're leaving the workforce, but I'm not sure they were choosing to leave the workforce. And I think that's sometimes where the stats get a little bit mixed up. In particular, what we have tried to do is create an environment where women don't have to choose in the tech space. So everything I'm saying, again, I recognize that there's a lot of privilege being a software company. But in as much as we want to make sure that people have the flexibility. So during the pandemic, we doubled down a lot on flexibility. Flexibility in what time you work, flexibility in where you work, how you work, so that people felt like they could get a lot of things done. The second thing we did is we really geared up on support. And in particular, we layered in things like care.com, a subscription, so that people could just get someone to maybe tutor their kids online and help with math. Someone that was able to be COVID tested could come into the home and collect things or help. We also created a program where people could just step away. We called it our COVID care leave, because people were like, I maybe I should, quit, or maybe I should, take a smaller role. And again, we didn't want women in particular, or caregivers, to feel like they had to choose. So that COVID care leave was a time that could be managed hourly, which people really found, up to 2 weeks, and still get paid and not have to worry about job security and so forth. And so I think it is making sure you're giving people the resources, the awareness, so that if you are in a technology space, you're not faced with do I keep my career running, or do I take care of my family and my family needs? So those were some of the ways that we really wanted to make sure that our women of color, our caregivers did not have to opt out and step away, but that they could have both their career and the things that were meaningful at home for them.
Amazing. And Lilly, I'm curious, if what your thoughts are given through kind of the lens through the Kapoor Center.
Definitely. And I think that those stats, as was mentioned earlier, are staggering. And even when you take a look at just even at a macro level, right, some of the stats show that the unemployment rate was double the rate for Black and Latinx populations, double the rate of the white counterparts. And when you think about where are they most highly concentrated, is women of color, right? Which is why we're having this dialogue. But if I could even just take a little step back, because even before, one of the things before the pandemic was specifically with technology, right? We were on this pace of automation, and there's so many different studies by McKinsey's and different centers that say, automation is going to impact about half of the different tasks across all major industries, and already has, and it'll displace, but it'll also create opportunities. Well, the thing with what happened with COVID now is that actually accelerated even more automation, right? If we think about what we had to do in order to stay safe and what pathways were available, who had those jobs. And I think it's one of the parts that to me as a technologist just brings a lot of concern, especially because we know that those types of jobs, unless you have the right pathways and skills and be able to enter, it just continues to polarize the labor market. And so you start to have folks who are really high and really low wage workers. And like it was mentioned earlier, a lot of specifically, even from my own experience of family or friends and just seeing my own neighborhood, who were the folks who were at the table of everything from getting your food, right? Like take a look at who were the folks, the farm workers, all the way to when you get who's shopping for you, who delivers, who are the nurses, who are the doctors, who are the educators. So I think that it's very evident of the further impact that it had on this continuous increase in who has the opportunity to even work from home, and the ones that didn't have that, you either got lost your job or got displaced, or you were literally putting your life on the line. And so I think it's important to think about that as well. And also to think about, even before the pandemic, the overrepresentation of people of color on some of these most vulnerable jobs that are also, like office admin. We saw retail, we saw a lot of different areas that continue to get impact. And so my question really going forward is, where do we go from here? And fortunately, there are a lot of different, from a federal perspective, looking at what is the $2 trillion American Jobs Plan going to manifest? How is that going to help create opportunities specifically targeted for women of color and specifically for this displaced workers? How are we creating opportunities for upskilling in the workforce, new jobs? I think that there's a lot of opportunity here to do it right. But it's important that we're also ensuring that we're creating pathways into the sectors that are going to have growth, and making sure that we're creating all those different, whether it's an apprenticeship, whether it's creating additional opportunities, especially for the working moms, right? We saw a bunch of coalitions that are starting to come up because we know that this is going to be important. So all that to say that this is what keeps me up at night. And also to add in on top of, and I'll close my remarks here on this topic, but if we think about, we had the pandemic, the displacement, but then we had also the movement of the Black Lives Matter movement, and what contributions were put towards racial justice. And so Capers Center, in collaboration with the Plug, recently released a commentary report showing the commitment, right? So it was estimated that $50 billion were pledged towards racial equity initiatives, with a lot of the big tech companies like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, you name it, who were contributed close to $626 million. But what has changed, right? And so some early numbers show that just even from the Black tech workforce, it's only increased by 1%. Some of the companies that got fundraising actually didn't increase that much significantly from the year before to now. And yeah, we still also have, and this is Nina can probably talk even more about entrepreneurship, but how are we also funding these opportunities? This is an opportunity for new entrepreneurs to come in, right? Here's a lot of folks who are rethinking what they were doing, but how are they even getting invested on? And so I think that we just have to look at a very comprehensive approach on all of this, of who's getting to build wealth. And we know that the tech companies, the data shows, those were the ones that had some of the largest profit margins in these multiple pandemics.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, being in the VC ecosystem, I can't echo that enough also. I mean, I think one thing that has come out of the pandemic is a lot of amazing women-led funds and diversity funds. And so, it's a little late to the game, but better late than never. And I think this is a good direction and a good step in the right direction. And I think building that up. And so with that, Nina, looking back to your early startup days, does that resonate as well?
Oh, absolutely. When I started the company, again, I was 25 years old. I didn't have a network. I certainly didn't have any access to funding. And Pinnacle is a bit of a unicorn because 25 years later, we have 0 outside investors and 0 outside capital. We had to pull ourselves up from our proverbial bootstraps. And the way that I did that was, quite frankly, the discipline of reinvesting back into the company for 20 years straight. Really focusing on the long-term really understanding the long game. But I knew that I have come to learn that there are 4.6 million Hispanic-owned businesses in this country, and that is not inclusive. If you include African-American companies, and if you include Asian companies, or just women of color, are the most entrepreneurial of all the small business sector. They are the most entrepreneurial, but yet they're receiving the least amount of venture capital. I think the awareness that has been created on this simple fact has heightened in the last 2 decades. And I'm really thrilled to see some more awareness and some more advocates, people like Lilly on this panel who are advocating on behalf of that. And so I think it is critical that we create awareness so that we can make a difference.
Absolutely. And then Tiffany, I'm curious, on your platform, Patreon, did you see kind of a spike of use? Because, typically I know, a lot of artists and more creators are on there, performers are on that platform. And I'm just curious if you've seen any new interesting industries emerge or people coming on that you wouldn't have expected. And how's that community kind of been impacted?
Yeah, we've definitely seen an explosion of growth. I think for us, one of the things that we see, which we think is a shame when you think about creativity, whatever your gift is. So whether it's podcasting or comedy or whatever, that honestly, we get the least amount of investment, particularly for people of color, least amount of investment. So one of the things that we've been really excited, and I think the pandemic really put pressure on that, is we've seen a real explosion in the number of creators who are coming on. Right now, we have well over 200,000 creators. And this past year, we finally hit the $2 billion mark on how much we've paid to our creators. And I think that that's been one of the things that you see, unfortunately, is that you have a lot of great talent, but if they're not able to be sustained, they drop up early. And if you're not able to perform in some of these live venues, then you lose out on that opportunity. So we're really excited about seeing that explosion of growth, seeing the diversity of the creators who are joining our platform every day. And then we're also starting to work on programming where we can actually take cohorts of people who are on their sort of earning journey and think about what are some of the things that they could be thinking about to grow their patron base, and so that they can get more members who will help subscribe to their work, pay them so that they can continue to do their art. And we're starting to see a really lovely sort of set of communities that are starting to grow and emerge from that so that they're able to take those learnings and hopefully scale their own impact and then reach into the community and bring more creators with them. One of my favorite stories is Kev on Stage, who is a brilliant comedian, super funny. When he joined Patreon, one of the things that he said was that because he was able to leverage the platform, he was able to hire more writers, and those writers were able to sustain their own families while still supporting art. And so that is something that we feel so passionately about, is how we can create that sustained economy for people who do their gift and do it well. And we want creation to be a career track just like any other, and we just want to leverage a digital medium to be able to help support that work that they're doing. So that makes us really proud.
Amazing. So I'll ask one question here before I kind of turn it to the audience. And just a reminder, if you guys do have any question for any of the panelists, please go ahead and type it in the Q&A box. But I'd love to, in case this is my last question, I'd love to know, what is your kind of ideal new normal look like in order to build a more equitable environment for women of color in the workplace? That's a kind of a heavy question. How about?
I'm happy to kick it off if you like. Is that helpful?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, sure. When we were in the middle of the pandemic, we started an initiative we called Reimagining How We Work. And we just wanted to acknowledge that we weren't going backwards. We weren't going to go back to normal. And it was up to us to redefine the type of company, how we worked, who we worked with, where we worked, and get people into kind of like a company-wide experiment and innovation. You know how sometimes people are like, well, the innovation team's really small and it's coveted and you never get a chance. Well, we sort of blew the doors open and said, everyone can have a voice in reinventing and reimagining. And to help get that kicked off, in particular, we stood up what we called a playbook. And it was describing the must-dos in this new normal kind of environment, or what we like to call digital first. And one of the must-dos, I think, really supported underrepresented talent and all talent, but in particular underrepresented in women of color and also other underrepresented groups. And that was something we call practicing virtual empathy. And as a leader, it meant that you had to see people, see the whole person, and you had to make sure that you were thinking through walking in their shoes and giving them, again, what they needed in this environment. And the reason we called it virtual is because the idea is, like, I had 1,000 people that started with the company that had never met their manager and had never been in one of our offices. So the only thing we had was this Zoom screen. And it became so important to make sure that you could create that belonging, that connection. And in some ways, one thing I do like about Zoom is it opened up the possibilities of people attending and going to things that they would have never had the chance to go to. One of our biggest examples was in January when we did our global sales kickoff, which was usually something super coveted. You got to go off to some fancy resort. Well, all 5,000 employees got to go. And you know, as a manager, making sure you could tap into that virtual empathy of seeing someone and inviting their point of view was so important and powerful. So in this new normal, I think more skills like that, you know, practicing relationships, those aren't going to be the nice to do's, those will be the must do's. And the leaders that really are able to be equipped and provide that kind of experience, those will be the leaders in the companies that really have, you know, the workforce of underrepresented talent, but all talent. So that's just one way we've reimagined our new normal.
And I can probably add onto that, just also, even before the pre-pandemic, right, of, we know that specifically in diversity and inclusion and equity, there's been so much funding and so much work and discussion. And Caper Center published a research called the Tech Levers that basically showed how expensive it was. $16 billion annually was going to basically being lost in turnover, right? And so one of the things is, how are we building the pathway for folks to enter the jobs, right? Because we know right now there's so many folks that may not have a job opportunity right now, but this is also a great time to get in. But then once you're in, how are we actually retaining? And it's a fundamental things that I really hope that we change, which is like better pay. If we think about women of color, the pay discrepancy that we still have, I think that's something that we shouldn't at all be taking in anymore, right? And so I think that that's especially now in this remote world and environment where now hopefully some of these myths that you had to work and you had to be in Silicon Valley to be in tech, that's been dispelled, right? So now we know that we could actually do this across. So where are the jobs and how are we also ensuring that we're creating more equitable pay for women of color, specifically improving the company leadership, right? I think just reflecting over the past, just thinking back of January 6th, I personally didn't even know what world we were going to be in. And as an immigrant where you're in search of better opportunities, and then what we saw that day to me really shook me, and saying like, what are we working for? What is really our vulnerability as individuals, as a country, really shook me, right? And so we need more company leaders that aren't just about doing business. This is really a time for more CEO that are activists and are really thinking, as how it was shared earlier, this empathy, right? The other part too is promotion. People want to be able to have that upward mobility in different areas and that continuous learning and growth. And I really hope that as we are, companies are reopening, they're really rethinking what is that quote unquote work-life balance really entail, the flexibility in schedules, the flexibility in how you even host some of these meetings and the collaborations, and hopefully it ultimately leads to more respectful work environments. And so I would just say from our end, those are things that we saw in the past. now we have the opportunity, as was shared by Marie, to reimagine how that actually gets implemented. So I hope that we continue to see more actual results and solutions. And I'm also really passionate about, from a K% perspective, just looking at alternative pathways into this workforce. How are we, creating new tech apprenticeships? How are we reinvesting community college tech pathways? So then that way we can provide opportunity for all folks to enter, specifically for working moms of color to also re-enter the economy.
I can layer in a couple of things, and building on what Ina Marie was saying, I think from a people practitioner standpoint, I think one of my biggest unlocks when I started my career in tech, which was not too long ago, one of the things that really surprised me was that there seemed to be a one-way perception of what tech careers looked like. It was like engineering. So there was either like, you believed in engineering and that was going to be the pathway for diversity, or there was no diversity. And then when I would look in other areas like our G&A function or looking in sales, I was just a little surprised that we didn't. I'm like, well, surely that's where we would see it. And that's where I really realized that we have a branding opportunity in tech to really think about, are we messaging the fact that people of color belong everywhere? We absolutely belong in engineering and product design and product development. We also equally belong in G&A, accounting, legal, sales, all of these areas, customer success. And so having a chance to really think about that from a programmatic standpoint, we were really proud in my former company to create a partnership with HBCUs, and particularly Spelman. We doubled down on Spelman to literally go to them and say, hey, sales is a wonderful career path, and let me tell you why. And sometimes just making that introduction and sort of facilitating those conversations. And we went after public policy students. We went literally journalism, because I mean, if you put 10 salespeople together and ask them what they did and what they studied in school, you get 10 different answers. And so introducing people to sales, and particularly enterprise sales, as an interesting career opportunity and what you can build by focusing on that became a really interesting pathway for us. And so I think sometimes it takes that creativity and looking across your entire spectrum to make sure that you're not only solving the important gap in engineering, but also that you're thinking across your entire organization and thinking about what the collective impact that representation can do for your company in all levels of decision that are being made. So that was definitely one thing. I would say the other thing is like really thinking about all spaces. So as Lilly just so eloquently said, we think about D&I practice with hiring, thriving, and belonging, because it's no good hiring people if you come in and have a lousy employee experience when you get there, and then it becomes a revolving door. And I think one thing, and I think Ina Marie also said this, so I'm just, hopefully my whole answer is amplifying, but I think the other thing that's really interesting, we just saw a stat that said like 40% of employees are actively thinking about taking a new career opportunity, because this pandemic is just opening up, like literally, if I learned how to figure it out working from my house, where else might I be able to apply my skills? And so we have a real risk that even some of the work that we've been doing on our D&I practices, we might actually lose some of that momentum if we're not really thinking about the incredible experience that we're providing for all of our talent, particularly our underrepresented talent. So I think this is a time where we really need to redouble our efforts around compelling offer. Are we really having good hygiene around performance calibration and promotion? All of those things, or we're going to find that we're corroding some of the great work that we've been fueling into our organizations.
Absolutely.
I can chime in here at the very end. There's not a lot to say given everything that's been said. I agree 100%. And so perhaps I'll amplify or overlay what I believe our new normal might bring. And what I truly believe is that it's going to require a leaning in on both sides. One, the employers to create an inclusive culture, to create programs and services to elevate not just women of color, but underrepresented communities, to recruit and create awareness of how to get into technology. By the way, this is why I have dedicated my entire life for advocating for people, not just minorities, and especially underrepresented communities, but everyone to get involved in the technology industry. It changed my life. And so I have been I've spent the last 25 years of my life kind of saying, come on in, the water's fine, get into business. Business is a beautiful thing. Technology is an incredible industry. And so I really believe that it's going to take a leaning in on both sides. One, in the corporations, and I believe that right now in this country, every single corporation, and we serve some of the largest ones, are leaning in to exactly this. So the opportunity exists right now. If you are a woman of color in this country, there are opportunities for you. Now you've got to go out and find them. The other leaning in on both parties is required from us. Education is and will continue to be the biggest equalizer in our country, but we have a responsibility to innovate, to learn, to create awareness, to search. And so I truly believe, you know, when we read the statistics and we hear the statistics about how low women, particularly women of color, are in IT, I don't get mad, I get motivated. And so if you can change your mindset and say, it's not happening to me, this is happening for me, don't get mad, get motivated, and really seek out. I can tell you unequivocally, every single large Fortune 500 company that we serve right now is talking about, how do we get more women? How do we get more women of color? How do we get more underrepresented communities in this company? And so for us, it is a time to lean in, to double down, to figure out how we can reinvent ourselves, how we can upskill ourselves. And I want to say something about the technology industry, because most people think to be in STEM, you have to be either in technology, engineering, mathematics, or science. And if you look at it as a target, that would be the middle. But everything around it is also tech enabled. Today, every single thing, whether you're in law or accounting or in media or whatever you're in, there's a technology component. And so whatever you're in, again, that reinvention of yourself. What am I doing today? What is the technology overlay? How can I continue to double down on my skills, to grow more, to invest more in myself, so that I can take advantage of these opportunities? Again, I'm an entrepreneur, and I always see the glass half full. I always see opportunities where people might not. And I'm saying to you that right now, the time is right now to recognize that technology, industry, and the opportunities that are created now are heightened more than ever. Pinnacle is growing in the Silicon Valley. We're serving some of the largest tech companies. We're looking for recruiters. We're looking for building our SAP practice. We're looking for salespeople. And so because I know, and because we serve the Fortune 500, we can see that the tech industry, it is their market right now. I mean, we are searching and finding. People are getting jobs at way more than they left them during the pandemic. Now is the time. So we have to seize the opportunity and lean into what we can do to capitalize on it. And by the way, these forums are exactly the opportunity to do that.
And if I can add real fast there, I think that the fact what Nina's saying is so important, because I would tell you, whenever I go to the communities, and I just did it like a few weeks ago, I did a training for Black church faith leaders. They're entrepreneurs now. So I told them we're all tech, because we're all now have the opportunity to be able to reimagine, and everything is tech enabled. So we're really at that turning point. And if I was to leave this forum with that, also sharing also with everybody that's here, the need for broadband for all, because if we think about who's getting those opportunities, right? How do we seize them? But if we're still not connected on the very fundamentals of infrastructure, I want to make sure that we also lead with that call to action. And I would also say for folks who are looking to get into companies, I would love to share resources for Caper Capital, which is the venture arm that invests in gap closing companies. There are so many jobs there. There are great opportunities. If you're also an entrepreneur and want to get connected, there are a lot of different opportunities there. And then I'll just share a quick resources. There's Career Commons Reskill America's providing stipends and laptops for folks who want to get in. Bitwise has Onward California. Guild Education has a Scale Up Coalition, which is all about reskilling, upskilling, and these are all ready for everybody to jump in. So just wanted to make sure I shared some of those resources.
Thank you so much, Lilly. And yeah, I can't echo enough what you both just said as well. I know within even the startup community, they've really woken up to not just obviously the social impact of diversity, but the business impact. It just makes good business sense when you have diverse teams, your business just does better. And to Nina's point, I got into venture capital the very, very unconventional way. I started off in marketing. And so from marketing, I've become a venture capitalist. And so just get out there. There are so many opportunities. There's startups that are working on the most incredible technologies and innovations out there and across all industries. So yes, they need us and they want us. So let's get out there, ladies. And so I know we have a few minutes left. Denise, I don't know if we need to wrap it up. But if there is time, I'd love to hear from a few ladies about what are some tips and strategies that women can use to advocate for themselves to stay in the workplace, right? Something to think about. I don't know if we have time to go through the answers, but it's definitely something that we may need another panel on.
But if everyone can run through and maybe just give, a short answer on that, absolutely. Let's do it.
I can go. My two, one is build your network. So make sure, fortify relationships across like functional disciplines, your discipline, internally and externally, and have a personal board of directors.
I love that. I'll just build on that by saying get involved. If you're in a company, seek out the employee communities or the employee resource groups. Almost every company these days are building those communities and allyships, and they're a great place to start, to have your voice heard, to do volunteer efforts, to really amplify some of what your perspective is. And I always like to leave these panels by saying, remember, you are the best you. You have a gift and a perspective that needs to be heard. Don't wait for it to be asked for. Share that, offer it, make sure that you're seen and heard. And this has been so great. So thank you for that question.
I would say that on my end, it's keep learning, stay curious, keep upskilling yourself, or really add points of so many intersections that this is really the time for everybody to keep mobilizing. And I would encourage you to get out of your comfort zone, right? And like it was shared earlier, how somebody entered their career from marketing to now VC. Well, I went from being an engineer to now working in philanthropy. So there's a whole different side of things, right? So I would just say keep learning, and also take a look at where is the future going, right? What are some of the new types of solutions and how do we leapfrog? So look at where clean energy is going. What's the future of different sectors that there might be jobs that we haven't seen yet, right? We saw like what's the uptake in social media from a few years ago. What are the new future jobs going to come? And I would say that with that sense of upskilling, also taking the investment in yourself, and maybe this is a time for more entrepreneurship. The cost to start your company has decreased. And so we need more women to also start more. So just stay curious, keep learning, keep moving.
I love what everyone has said. That I love what all these ladies have such great wisdom. They're just dropping great nuggets here. When I think about tips of what to give to women, I think about my own past, two things: courage and learning mindset. It takes a lot of courage to get out of your comfort zone. It takes a lot of courage to start a company. It takes a lot of courage to be the only one. It takes a lot of courage to do all these things that these beautiful ladies had talked to you about getting into ERGs, seeking leadership roles, courage, and a learning mindset. But more tangibly, what I want to leave you with is today, you must have a digital footprint. If you are not on LinkedIn, if you don't have a digital footprint of the intricacies and the subtleties of your personal experience, they can't find you. Who is they? Organizations, employers, they can't find you. Today, more employers are using AI and machine learning to scrape data of people that are looking and that are not looking. Pinnacle is using AI and machine learning. We're looking through social, we're using every tool we can to find underrepresented, incredible leaders, and we do so by using technology. So if you don't have a digital brand out there, we can't find you. So make sure that you build your digital brand, put the subtleties of what your experience is in, because you will allow yourself to be found. So that's my little thing I want to leave you with to make sure that you don't miss out on those opportunities.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All the ladies that have joined us. I think I'll pass it back to Denise.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Netta, for moderating this great conversation. I don't know. I'm sure everybody, that has joined us today that can agree that this was just very motivating, very inspiring conversation. I myself learned so much. So thanks so much to our speakers, Lilly, Nina, Ina Marie, Tiffany. Thanks so much for joining us here today and really sharing all your thoughts and insights to all of us. And thanks to everyone who joined us. And definitely hope to see you all again soon. And remember, don't get mad, get motivated, stay curious, and keep learning. And enjoy the rest of